watu wawili mnashirikiana kupokonya watu mali zao, alafu mnakula mkinenepa tu. Haidha mkubali kurudisha mali za watu ama mkatae. Mimi mwenyewe najua vile nitazichukua.
Very good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on the 11th day of January 2021. We are coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi, right here at our Look Up TV studios. And you're just on time for the week in focus. Today on the show, we're going to be talking about different issues. We're going to be handling a little bit about politics and, of course, the murders that happened last week that have raised a lot of conversation on social media and across the country in general. And of course, we'll also be talking about back to school. It has been 1 week and yet some schools are not yet open. And to help me just break this down, with me on set is Onchari Oyeyo, who is a political scientist and many more other titles. So you're going to analyze the situation and you're going to jump straight in with our conversation and looking at the political scene now that we are approaching 2022. We have different by-elections. We have the Nairobi by-election that is yet to come. And so we have over 20 people that have declared interest in that seat. One of them being former Kiambu Governor, Ferdinand Waititu. Yes, and given that he was impeached, so he was ousted when he was in power, citing the reasons that were cited, abuse of office, corruption, among other things. So this is a person whose record is already stained, coming back into the race. So what does that really say about us as the people who could be considering to have him back in office?
Well, thank you so much, Nancy Melima. Now, the Nairobi by-election is a bit confusing at the moment. I cannot authoritatively say that it's going to happen. Chances of the by-election not happening are very high.
Yes.
Because I think as of last week, the MCAs advertised the ongoing process of vetting the deputy gubernatorial nominee who was nominated by Sonko, the impeached governor. So if that happens and she successfully gets to be endorsed for deputy governorship, then she can be elevated.
We need to have a by-election.
That is it.
Yes.
And from an economic standpoint, I think it's going to be a good idea because Kenyans are suffering. I don't think they want to invest money in a by-election in Nairobi at this point. And of course, we're suffering from the effects of COVID. So from an economic standpoint, that is going to be okay. But obviously, from a political standpoint, it's a good run for the top candidates, especially for the presidency. Ruto will come in, endorse his candidate, and obviously Raila will have his candidate. Then we can be able to have a taste of 2022, a small taste of heaven or hell.
What is to come?
Yes.
What is waiting for us?
Yeah. So in the interest of the economic, position of Kenyans, I think it's good if we don't have a by-election. But again, constitutionally, we need to have a by-election. If you look at advanced countries or democracies, it doesn't matter how close you are to the next election. If a member of parliament or a senator, whoever has died just before the election, even if it's 1 month, a by-election has to be held. So the argument of, the economy is not doing well, or it's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
So according to the constitution, we need to have
A by-election is in
by-election.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
So now the involvement of Waititu, that is what you brought up.
yes.
The law is very clear. You know, that is what some people keep on talking about.
That's
the
what
law.
lawyers say. That's what analysts say all the time.
The law is very clear.
Yes.
Anyway, the provisions in the constitution stipulate that if someone has been accused of something but has not been convicted, then they are still considered not guilty until, of course, a court of
Until
law
proven guilty.
finds them guilty. Then they can be barred from vying. That is why IBC does not have the legal stand to actually bar Waititu from vying. At first, there was, you know, a semblance of blockade against Waititu, but then it was lifted because IBC does not have that legal strength to stop Waititu from vying until, of course, he gets convicted. So far, he has not.
Yeah.
So he has been cleared to actually be a candidate. Now, from an ethical standpoint, if I can decide to become a moralist, this is someone who was shamefully ousted from office because of corruption. This is the same gentleman we were told had assigned or allocated so much money for peace in South Sudan, presidential swearing in, and so many other shenanigans. Huge amounts of money that was, of course, later channeled to his accounts. So it's an abuse of the process if he comes back, like he's going to come back and contest. But then again, the law is the law, and they call it an ass. So he has to be allowed to vie. So it will be, you know, upon Nairobians to make up their minds. Do they want Waititu as the governor or not? Yeah.
And it is also interesting to see what is happening in Homa Bay over the weekend, where the former Nairobi governor, Evans Kidero,
Yeah.
he has already started running campaigns. Yeah, going on about how they should make a right choice, and given his track record.
In Nairobi.
Yes, given his track record.
Of corruption, of
Yes,
course.
and you know, his tenure was marked by a lot of corruption allegations. He
Yeah.
still has a case in the court.
Yes.
Yes, so that is still pending.
Yes.
And yet he is out here
Campaigning.
asking
Now-
for these votes, yes.
Yeah, you know, for you to invest money and in a campaign, it means the signs are good from the courts. It means chances of being cleared and, you know, being clean enough to vie are very high. That is why he's gone ahead to actually put his money there. And to the point where Sonko had not been impeached, people were saying Sonko had done something that was a bit better than what Kidero had done. But given the impeachment of Sonko, now
Yeah.
Kidero can, you know, come out and
It's
say,
sort of been cleansed.
yes. So he can claim to actually have been better. That's why it's talking about a track record he left in Nairobi. He claims, during his time there was a semblance of order, development was organized, and at some point he was saying Sonko's childish games were not there during his time. So now he is claiming the, you know, operational high ground, and I think that is the record he's taking to Homa Bay. Given his economic strength, I'm told he has a lot of money. He's likely to flood that local county with money, and he's going to be a strong candidate, if you ask me. And even chances of winning and becoming a governor are very high, if you ask me.
Okay.
Again, it's about the process we have here, which does not, you know, run the way we expect. Because if we had a strictly serious process, legal process, most of these guys could be convicted by now, which means they can effectively be barred from contesting in these elections, but it's not happening. And then, of course, you know, our justice system is not very clean. Sometimes justice is up for purchase, so it's sold to the highest bidder. so long as your pockets are heavy, you can as well, you know, buy justice in the courts, and then you get cleared and you vie.
Yeah.
That is why even with all the cases he has, corruption cases, of course, he's going to be on the ballot. You can bet on that. Yeah, and he's likely to win. If you ask me, I'll tell you Kidero can win an election in Homa Bay. Yeah, he has a name, and he has begun early, and he has the money.
Yeah.
And of course, we have what we call kingmaker politics in Kenya. In Nyanza, especially Luo Nyanza, it's Raila. Rift Valley, now it's Ruto. Initially it used to be Moi, now it's Ruto.
Yeah.
So whether you as white as cotton or as dark as coal, if the kingmaker says it's so and so, that is it. It's as good as done.
Okay, and now since they might not be barred by
IBC.
by the IBC,
Yes.
but we are the people who are going to be electing them in office. So if we elect them in office, then you see, what does that say about us as the people? Because they might be the allegations, they might be true, you know, because like Waititu was impeached. But now if he runs again and then we elect him in office,
Yes.
then what does that say about us as the people?
Now, number one, most likely we don't agree with the process which led to the impeachment of Waititu. That is one message you can get, because I mean the process is not very clean. Like if you look at the way Sonko was impeached here, some of those MCAs who are allegedly able to vote for him to be impeached were actually with him in Kwale.
Yeah.
But then again, if you know the votes that were counted went all the way to 88. There simply as about 112 MCAs who can vote. The governor was with around 60 MCAs or 57 down there. So if you subtract 112, I mean 57 from 112, you'll get a very small number, around 60 something. So where did number 88 come from? So because of the questions we raised over the process of impeachment, voters can come out and say, because it was done erroneously, we're going to take the person
Then we're
back.
still going to vote for our
Yes,
candidate.
to disprove what happened. And then again, of course, the Senate is also not very clean. We've had cases of senators being given money. Like Sonko came out and claimed that senators were given 2 million each to impeach him. Now, I cannot say whether that is true or
Verify,
not, but
yes.
it's very possible because, you know, bribery in Kenyan politics is very, very common. So if that is something voters can listen to, then they can possibly vote in someone who has been impeached. Then number two, we have a problem of voter enlightenment in Kenya. Now, if in a place like the United States where, you know, voters actually contribute to politicians, there's an element of seriousness when it comes to voting.
Yeah.
You're not going to expect a politician to give you money for you to vote. But in Kenya, guys buy votes. So if I show up with a lot of money, you will forget that I was impeached, and then you vote me in.
Sing a new song.
That is
The
it.
tune that is.
Yeah. So you'll begin remembering that I'm not a nice person after I've stolen from you a second time. Yeah. That's when you'll remember, this guy was actually impeached. So he came back, gave me some 2,000 or 500 or whatever, and I voted him back. Oh, yeah. So voters forget. So the best way, which we've not done to date, is voter education. And voter education in most democracies goes hand in hand with literacy levels. If someone is bright enough,
Yeah.
they can be able to read, they can access a newspaper, they can access some website, read about people, read about their rights, what they expect from their leaders and politicians. Then they can stop expecting bribes. Then they can also be very strict when it comes to scrutiny of their leaders, which means the clowns and conmen and the charlatans we vote to office will be blocked or left out. Until then, it's going to be monkeys all the way.
Monkey business. Okay, and now Nairobi politics. Nairobi politics definitely shapes, you know, the general election, just an outlook of how it's going to be. Because
Yeah.
Nairobi is it's a highly contested area. And you know,
Yes.
Nairobi is metropolitan. So you have to have a popular vote and yes. But now looking at the by-elections that, you know, we are probably anticipating for, seeing Deputy President endorsing Bishop Margaret, Bishop Margaret, and of course there have been over 20 aspirants for the same seat.
Yes.
And for Jubilee and ODM, they seem to be fronting one candidate as together. So this is causing a lot of conversation. And what does this mean then for ODM? Because if then they are fronting one candidate together with Jubilee, so this will be Jubilee candidate as is anticipated.
Yes.
Yes. So what does that mean for them and the party going into 2022?
Now, when ODM came out and said they'll be supporting a Jubilee candidate, some people felt like, you know, that is you know, some evidence or testimony of the unity between the president and the former prime minister.
Yeah.
But if you ask me, that will be an assumption that the by-election might not be held, so they don't have to even rush and get prepared for that.
Oh, they might have seen that.
Yes. So if it's held, and then, you know, they field a front one candidate against the candidate supported by the deputy president, again, now that points to the strength of the deputy president. remember in March, I think by March, April 2018, most of us actually dismissed the deputy president when we were told that, oh, you know, it was against the handshake. And Raila and Uhuru had come together, so he was kind of, you know, isolated.
Sidelined.
Yeah, but then again, he fought his way through 2018, 2019, and he's here now. Every single day you can see the headlines. If it's Standard, he's done. If it's Nation, he's locked out. But he keeps on rising from the ashes, like the proverbial phoenix.
Okay.
So you can see what's happening in Mount Kenya. A couple of weeks ago, we had a by-election in Katiru Ward, where there was a candidate supported by the Kieleweke team, which is of course led by the president. And the candidate lost to a hustler. That is a Ruto candidate.
Yeah.
Let me take you back to Msambweni. So what happened?
Yes.
The former prime minister went down there and said, if you support the Boga guy, you're supporting BBI, and you together with me and the president.
Yeah.
If you support the other guy, you're supporting the deputy president, which means you're against BBI. The Msambweni voters went and resoundingly rejected the former prime minister's message, and they supported Ruto's candidate.
Ruto, yes.
Now, if you go back again a few months, or you know, I think it was 2018 or 2019 in Ugenya, the bedrock of ODM, you know, politics. Senator Orengo went down there and said, if you support Ochieng, David Ochieng, you're supporting William Ruto. If you support Karani, you're supporting Raila. Voters again sided with who? Ochieng, the alleged candidate of the deputy president.
Deputy, yes.
Come to Mbakasi South. There was Sumra, and then there was Mawathe. Again, the same narrative. If you support Mawathe, you're supporting William Ruto. If you support Sumra, the ODM candidate, you're supporting Baba and the handshake. What happened? Again, the handshake candidate was washed, was beaten. So out of 5 National Assembly by-elections, the Ruto candidates, 4 of them have actually won. So the message is very simple. Going to the by-election in Nairobi, the candidate to watch is the hustler.
So in this case,
for so many
Bishop
reasons.
Margaret.
Yes. Number one, Bishop has a strong grassroots mobilization scheme, which you can call scam in Nairobi. She's a Nairobi politician.
And she has been the Astarehe MP.
She actually beat Kamanda, someone you can call the father of Nairobi politics. She beat him. So she has a track record of embarrassing a solid Nairobi politician.
A veteran.
Yes. If you go to the grassroots, if you go to the slums, the place where Sonko is, you know, king, Margaret Wanjiru is number 2. So if Sonko is not on the ballot, the next best guy who can access those nooks and crannies of the slums is Wanjiru. That is a place some of these guys who are going to be fronted by Jubilee will not get to. The second reason is the disenchantment of voters. The message the president is giving is not resonating with voters. Kenyans are suffering. COVID money was stolen. We're focusing on capital projects, like you can see the expressway from the airport all the way to Westlands. That is not going to put a meal on the table. And you cannot point to something like SGR. It's a white elephant. It's not being used. There's no economic value at all. So the Jubilee message, together with the handshake, falls on deaf ears because Kenyans want to see a meal on the table. They want to see masks. They want to see sanitizers. Right? That is not being available at this moment. That is why the hustler message is what is likely to sink and lead to results. So the candidate to watch will be the hustler candidate. I'm not saying the Jubilee candidate will not win. It's still an open race for the moment. Yeah, and then of course I've given you the track record of the performance
of the different elections that have been held. So does this mean that ODM, they need to, you know, like maybe have a meeting just to track the progress as they prepare for 2022?
A reorganization of ODM as a party is long overdue. If it's not being done, Raila is in for a shock. You know, the deputy president is a very unique politician. I might not like him, you might not like him, and some people might not like him. That is a man who is sober 24/7. He is very brilliant. He is very calculative. And he has one more benefit. He has been around for so long. He's actually been part of the system. When he talks about hustler and considers himself or classifies himself as an outsider, I want us to remember that this is a guy who was with Moi longer than even Gideon himself. Uhuru Kenyatta found William Ruto in government. Okay, he got into politics by beating a veteran politician called Chesire in Eldoret North.
Yeah.
So he has been in the system. When he comes out and says, my friend, this is in your system, he means it. He has been there. So he's very sharp. And then, he has been able to learn from all these guys. He has been able to learn from Raila. So he knows how to mobilize even before he shows up. That is why you cannot embarrass him in a rally at all.
Okay, but when you talk about the hustler narrative,
Yes.
you know that to some people, the hustler narrative, it's one thing for the deputy president to call himself a hustler, but there have been allegations again of corruption.
Yes.
Like land, there have been the many mentioned
Yes.
allegations of corruption.
Yes.
So then, and the hustler also narrative, it was a conversation that was loud at the burial of Mudavadi's mother's
mom.
burial.
Yes.
Yes. And so, because there's always a fight between dynasties and hustlers.
Yes.
So dynasties, of course, it will be a focus on the president and, of course, former Prime Minister Raila and Mudavadi, people who have people will say, inherited power.
Yes.
And hustlers will claim that then this is our chance to be seen and to be heard. We did not have anyone pave the way for us. We hustled our way here.
Yes.
But then people will demand and say that if you then call yourself a hustler, then your track record again has to be clean. Like your hustle has to be clean.
Not necessarily. We're in Kenya. Third world country. Third world politics, third world ethics, third world justice, and third world common sense. When you look at all these guys you've talked about, the president, former prime minister, the likes of Gideon Moi, Musalia Mudavadi, and the deputy president himself, can you give me a clean politician? The answer is no. If you look at the president himself, we have allegations, and some of them confirmed, of huge tracts of land in some funny parts of Kenya. If you go, for example, to the coast, you'll find land where, if you cross the fence, you'll find so many squatters, and then thousands of acres over here. The land is attached to the first family. If you go to the former prime minister, there are allegations as well. If you go to Musalia, Musalia has been in government. At some point, he was a vice president.
Yeah.
Okay? So you cannot, if you decide to talk about corruption, when you're mentioning Ruto, you have to talk about corruption when you're talking about the president, Gideon Moi, and all these other guys. So we have to be uniform. Then number two, the dynasty versus hustler narrative will never go away. It's now deeply entrenched. You cannot wish it away. And that's why it was a main topic for discussion at the funeral, because they know the weight. The problem is they don't understand how politics works. In as much as they've been around for so long, when you talk about something repeatedly, number one, you demonstrate your fear. Number two, you give it more currency. It's not going away. It's not going away in this election of 2022, and even in 2027, it won't go away. No. Yes, and unfortunately or fortunately, the number of Kenyans who actually associate or identify themselves with this hustler side is so high. That is why the president has found it very hard to convince his people to come to his side. Very, very hard. Yes. And when you talk about, like they were talking about tribes, like, the founding father is a Kikuyu. We cannot hide that because the president was discussing that. We've shied away from talking about this for so long. The next president was Kalenjin, okay? That is Moi. The next president after Moi was Kibaki. Now, if Uhuru was sincere, then he should have said, because we've had two Kikuyus and one Kale, let's have someone else instead of...
But again, don't you
just a moment.
Okay.
Yeah, so he should have been, magnanimous enough to say, we've had two Kikuyus and one Kale, so instead of giving it back to a Kale ama Kikuyu, let's get what? A Mluya or a Mkisi like myself here. He should have said that. Why should he wait to be president and then begin saying, now, we don't want another Kale? That is unfair. And Kenyans always forget. The nonsense of tribes does not exist. We have only two tribes in Kenya. The rich and the poor. So that is why Uhuru, Ruto and someone like Musalia can actually find a common ground. They can sit down and have a drink. And you won't be there. and I want to be there. Why? Because we don't have that money. So what we need to do is to remember that when they talk about tribes, they're actually referring to only two. Yeah. So if it's Musalia who becomes president, he'll be from the same tribe of the rich. That is the
dynasties.
Point. Yes.
But now, as you talk about that, then does that mean, because politics, essentially, when leaders are elected, the power is within the people. So if people decided to vote dynasties out, hustlers out, then people can have the candidate of their choice. So people have the power. So we should not be looking at the president or anyone telling us this tribe has been leading or that tribe has been leading or it's time for the hustlers. Shouldn't Kenyans be the ones just to analyze the situation and say, this leader has a lot to offer. This is their track record. Yes.
I agree with you. But you know, again, this is what we call them developmental stages in a democracy. Primordial or primitive democracies tend to create what we call centers of power, which basically become centers of influence. Now, if you go to the West, the number of people who influence voting patterns is very small. You can be a senator, you can be a congressman, but the people who listen to you is very, very, the number of people who listen to you is very, small. Now, in African countries, we tend to cling to people. So one person can say something and influence the voting patterns of an entire, constituency, sometimes even a county.
Yeah.
Because our politics is a bit primitive. We still look up to people for direction, for advice, for guidance. So when the president talks about something, you can expect that to have some kind of impact in a place where he's considered a big voice, like a kingmaker. When Raila says something, you can expect the entire Luo Nyanza to actually walk along that line. So that is where we are, and we cannot run away from that.
Okay, we will be back. We are taking a short break here on the Weekend Focus, but there's still plenty more to discuss.
Turn your 50 bob into a $1 million shilling investment. Changamka and Shindagari Chap Chap with Hometel. There's millions in shillings worth of prizes to be won. Send your 50 bob to paybill number 4040153 and get a chance to win 20,000 shillings daily. And each week, one person gets a chance to walk away with a Mazda Demio and another a Beth Mobility motorbike. Remember, the more times you try, you could be the winner of a fantastic Toyota Prado. Do not be left out. Send 50 shillings to paybill number 40153, account name Lookup TV, and get yourself a Hometel lucky number. Changamka and Shindagari Chap Chap with Hometel promotion. For more information, visit www.shindagari.co.ke. Terms and conditions apply.
Bako kezia mpaka nitakapomaliza naye ndio utampata.
Mbona ninyi mkumbe wanyama pori mkaishi na wanyama wenzenu huko? Hebu nisaidie kufungua.
Toka hapa vibaya, amesema mtoke.
Toka, enda. Peleka huko. Tuondoleni hapa chawa na kunguni. Ulimtupa ushauri huo jikikimbia Canada. Waachana. Sasa hata hivi uza wangu hautakia nini? Hata unarudi upenzi.
Kiza Savimbi, I am taking this child to hospital. Ole wako. Niambiwe na anything wrong with her. Tajua mimi nani?
Nyinyi watu wawili mnashirikiana kupokonya watu mali zao, alafu mnakula mkinenepa tu. Haidha mkubali kurudisha mali za watu, ama mkatae. Mimi mwenyewe najua vile nitazirudisha.
Welcome back to the program. You are watching The Week in Focus right here on Look Up TV. And today we are talking about a few issues. Just before the break, we were handling the politics of Nairobi as we are gearing on to 2022. And remember, you can engage with us on social media. And of course, our SMS number, which is 20374. Texting and calling your ideas and suggestions and contribute to the conversations that we have on the show. And as we were progressing, now let us take a look at Uganda. Yes, our neighbors right here in East Africa.
Yeah.
So they are going to the polls come Thursday, which is going to be the 14th.
Of January.
Yes. And their campaigns have been marred with a lot of violence. So Bobi Wine, who is the frontrunner of the opposition, yes, he has gone through the same thing that Kizza Besigye went through over the years.
Yeah.
Because as we know, Museveni has been in power for 35 years now.
More than 3 decades.
Yes. So what does this say for Uganda? Are they where many countries were a long time ago?
Now, it's quite unfortunate. What's going on in Uganda is quite unfortunate, and you can compare what's going on there to what's happening in Rwanda as well, and to some extent, I think, in Burundi. But Rwanda and Uganda are extreme cases of what was happening in Zimbabwe during the time
with the
of
late
Mugabe. So it's unfortunate because it happens. It tends to be an African phenomenon where leaders don't, find it easy to, get off power. They always want to die in, in office. The fight that has been put up by Bobi Wine is commendable, but then again, I don't think he's the right person to even replace Museveni at this point. When you assess the IQ of the two guys, Museveni versus Bobi Wine, Museveni comes on top. He's a bright man. The unfortunate part is, I think he feels entitled to be president, and since, of course, the elimination of term limits in 2005, now I think he's set to be president for life until, of course, he feels like, hey, I'm old enough now. Let me just walk away into the, the sunset and, let someone else. Yeah, which I think might not happen.
Of course.
He made a very funny statement sometimes back when he was being interviewed by some BBC journalist, where he said, I planted a plantation. It's now begun to bear fruit. Why should I walk away? Right at the moment when it's beginning to pay back. So he feels like he should be collecting the fruits in Uganda because apparently it's his plantation. Now, Bobi Wine is a musician, which is very good. I like artists, but
He's
I don't
creative.
think. I don't think he has the intellectual gravitas and even the vision that is required to take Uganda to the next level after such a long, hellish period of Mugabe. In fact, Kizza was a bit bright. He had the leadership, weight to take over from Museveni. But Museveni crushed him, like, of course, he's doing to Bobi. But for the sake of, checks and balances, I think the movement that has been created by Bobi Wine is okay. Only that it's not going to be strong enough to topple Museveni. There's a lot of excitement, and that excitement does not lead to votes that can be counted in a dictatorship. So you can expect, if Museveni feels like he's going to lose it, ballots will be marked somewhere and they'll be counted.
Yes, again, about the free and fair elections.
It never happens
That
in
is the
Uganda.
question.
It never happens in Uganda. It never happens in Rwanda. And obviously it never happened in Tanzania as well. And free and fair elections does not just mean guys are allowed to go and vote. And then after they vote, ballots are stuffed in some other place in favor of some candidate. Scaring people not to vote in itself is some kind of taint on the process. So that has happened as we speak, because there's some places where Bobi Wine was not allowed to actually campaign in the name of COVID. So he could be stopped, but then for Museveni it was okay to do the same thing, like it happened in Tanzania. The opposition candidate Tundu Lissu was stopped from campaigning in some places, and then of course he lost. So you can expect the same outcome in Uganda. So the unfortunate part is this: Unlike in some places where, for example, you saw what happened in the US when Trump did what he did. The condemnation from France, Britain, all those countries was swift and very clear. And it does not matter how you relate with a foreign leader. If he has done something you think is not befitting a democracy or that is against, human rights, you come out and speak. The president of the Republic of Kenya has not made a statement condemning what Museveni has done in the campaign process. He never made a comment regarding what Magufuli was doing during the campaign process. Now, it's not just Uhuru Kenyatta who should talk. We expect African leaders to also condemn that. But then again, you remember the doctrines of equity. He who comes to equity must come with clean hands. So the moment your hands are not clean, you cannot condemn someone who's doing the same thing.
Okay. So then this means then Africa still has a long way to go.
Thank you.
When it comes to free and fair elections.
We still have a long way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
And now let's take a look at schools. It has been 1 week since schools were opened officially last week on Monday.
Yes.
And there are still some students who have not reported to school.
Yeah.
The floods in Rift Valley, in different parts of the country actually, in Rift Valley, in Nyando, different sectors.
Yes.
And there are students at home. So the government, actually the CS Education, Magoha, said that, students can go and study under trees.
Yeah.
But then we've seen the weather. It has been raining night and day.
Yeah.
So coming from a period where students have been at home for such a long time, then again they have not been able to report. Was the government prepared for this? Because it was going to be an eventuality, and it is here with us.
Now, the floods you're talking about are not a new occurrence in Kenya. They've occurred ever since me and you. In fact, even before we were born.
Yes.
They've always been there. Throughout my entire life, I've seen River Nyando flood, burst its banks and kill people, destroy homes, and kill livestock. I've seen that happen year in, year out, from one government to the next. So we are this bunch of fools who never learn from any disaster, because we're so absorbed into the business of stealing that we forget what we're supposed to be doing as leaders. The flooding was happening during Kibaki's time. It's happening during Uhuru's time. It was happening during Moi's time. Why? Don't we have money? We have money, but this money is always stolen. And obviously, when you look at the money that was stolen, that was meant for sanitizers and masks, and actually even masks donated by Jack Ma, the Chinese philanthropist.
The COVID-19 millionaires.
Yeah, it was stolen. So if they can steal COVID-19 money, who tells you they're going to construct classrooms? And then the CS for Education makes a really silly statement saying kids can learn under trees. So are you telling me that these trees are good enough to protect the kids from sunshine and rain? Of course, the answer is no.
And also the cold.
So let's assume from Monday to Saturday we have rainfall. Does it mean the kids cannot learn? So that is the problem. That is the same problem we saw when this government, under the president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was focusing on getting tablets, when these kids didn't even have classrooms. Okay, in some places where there was no power. And then there were no plans to get solar, chargers for the laptops. So that's what we do. Confused and corrupt. That is the problem. So we're going to continue seeing these problems again and again as we keep on voting in gangsters who mind their pockets and not our heads. Yeah, and it's not just about schoolwork. Forget even about schoolwork. Look back at COVID.
Different sectors,
Yeah, because even as we talk about kids going to school, some classes are not structured in a way that can accommodate these kids so as to allow for social distancing.
Yes.
They're not. Some of these kids cannot even afford masks back home. So if we were serious in any way, we could even come up with a way to avail masks, in school, so that when kids come in, at least they're given what? Masks. We don't have that. So going to school itself to learn under a tree is a stretch. Of course it's shameful, but it's a stretch.
Yeah.
Huku nyuma, it's actually even worse.
And
Yes.
because opening schools is something that we have been anticipating for. It had been pushed severally in 2020
Yeah.
because of the surge of new cases. So it was something that we were actually anticipating for. And the longer it took, some classrooms were even transformed to houses that people are now living in, so that the landlords can now, get the rent.
Yeah.
But they still need the money. And some schools were closed down permanently because there was no source of income.
Yes.
So were we ready to open schools?
Kenyans will never be ready. So postponement to a future date, to a whatever, was not going to cut it. It can never help, because we can never be ready. What we need a president who understands the value of education. Way back in the 1960s, I think around 1961, the Americans elected a president called JFK, who made it very clear by saying, our progress as a nation can be no swifter than our progress in education, because the human mind is our fundamental resource.
Yeah.
So he understood the value of education. You've gone to school, and that is why you're able to actually sit here and ask me very tough questions. And at the end of the month, you can expect something. Now, for someone who's not gone to school, they're down there doing farming at the mercy of the weather. If there's no rainfall, the crops fail, and you have nothing. So if we get someone, a leader, a national leader, like a president, who understands the value of education, then corruption, especially in the education sector, will be eliminated. All these cartels and scammers looking for money by availing fake books and not channeling money for the construction of classrooms will be eliminated. Then we can have kids going to school and getting proper education. All this nonsense of buying certificates and giving kids fake information will stop. And it's not just Kenya that is captive to fake education. We've gone to school to run our mouths. Education, when it's serious and deep, leads to innovation. It leads to creation of what you can see. The Chinese took time and got to understand the value of practical education, which transforms people's lives.
Yeah.
So they endeavor to manufacture stuff that can be used. Kenyans are running around with degrees that they cannot even, support. Someone has a degree with a first class, when they open their mouths, you see a big difference between the degree and the person. We are stuck. We actually where we were 60 years ago in terms of manufacturing, in terms of innovation. So we've made some progress, which is very, very minimal. But when we talk about it, it's like we've made this giant, leap. We've not.
Okay. So again, you tie it down again to leadership.
And yes.
So with leadership, then it will influence
everything.
All
rises
these other sectors.
And falls with leadership.
Okay.
Yes.
And now, speaking of leadership, the Chief Justice David Maraga has retired officially.
Very
today.
sad.
Yes.
We'll miss him.
Yeah. And now the Deputy Chief Justice Philomena Mwilu is going to assume office as we wait for the appointment from the president. And now his tenure, we know the highlight of his career as Chief Justice was the 2017 elections.
Presidential election.
Yes.
Yeah.
That were null and void.
Yes.
Yes. So that is a highlight for his career.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of its kind, because it was the very first.
Yeah, that is what we call courage under fire, and that's what it means to be a man of integrity. It was very hot. There was pressure from everywhere. The opposition obviously felt they were aggrieved, wanted the election nullified. The government side, led by the president, felt it was going to be a waste of the money they spent in running the campaigns, but still he had to stand with what he felt was right. That is the same man who advised the president to dissolve parliament. So he had the kind of courage that we need if we have to make progress. The problem is this: the number of people who have the kind of character Maraga had or has is very small. But again, instead of casting the darkness, we're going to have to stand with that one candle, because no amount of darkness again can blow out that candle. So we'll keep on, looking forward to getting more Maragas. For now, there are not so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully they are still there.
Yeah.
And looking even at last time's appointments that had been fronted. We had the likes of we had Njoki Ndung'u.
Yes.
Yeah, there were a few names that were there. So, and looking at that, there was fault in each and every initiatory candidate that
Yes.
had been fronted,
Yes.
according to people. So will it be harder to then get someone of the same integrity, of the same professionalism and ethics?
If you ask me, if they have to pick the president of the Supreme Court or the whatever, the justice, I mean, if they have to pick a CJ from the group we have, that is Wanjala, Mwilu,
Yeah.
Ndungu, that is not going to happen. I don't think there's anyone among these guys who has the strength and character of Maraga. So replacing him is going to be very hard. But again, most of the time it's all about working with what you have. So, you have to look for the one-eyed man among the blind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, looking at the track record and just ensuring that the right candidate then gets the job.
Yeah.
Yes. And then now we can deviate a little
Okay.
into other matters. We are now looking at different situations in the country. Say, of course, we've talked about the floods.
Yes.
Then this is a repetition of over the years, just like you had stated.
Yes.
So then, what does it take for change to be, enacted in this country?
It's going to take committed men and women. Obviously, it's going to be a very small number who understand where Kenya needs to be. We have to abandon the foolishness of Africans who don't want to learn from experience. I've attended so many forums where people say the US is 200 years old as a democracy, or maybe more than 200 years old from 1776, so we cannot compare ourselves to them.
Yeah,
Or the UK, maybe, they've been around for so long.
for a long time, yes.
But here's the problem. Most of these guys who've built all these systems we're seeing today did not have anything to learn from. Okay? When you read that small book you read, I think, when you were in high school, Think Big by Ben Carson,
Yes, I did.
one of the I's in the book is insight. Insight basically means you benefit from those who have been to where you want to go. If I walk and then I find a hole somewhere and then I trip and fall inside and then get out, as you watch me, I don't expect you to fall into the same what, because you've seen me trip and fall.
Yeah.
You should be able to avoid it. You get insight. You get to benefit from my shortcomings. So what we can do at the very minimum is to copy paste, right? Just like we copy their constitutions, we copy even the stupid things. For example, Kenya has a very small economy compared to a state in the US like California, for instance. But we have more governors and more senators than they have for no reason. Okay? How we copied that, I don't know.
But also our country has diversity of tribes, and so there's always a question of representation of different tribes in different political seats, the cabinet.
Let me tell you something today about what we talk about tribes. Like BBI is predicated on bringing in more people from the tribes so as to avoid fighting. If you have to create positions for everybody for you to stop fighting, then you're very foolish.
But then what is our solution? Because
A
in
clean
the country,
system is this. Let people make sure that there is civic education. People get to understand that I have to resist and vote for the person I want. Then we need a system that is clean. If I contest and you contest and I beat you and you're satisfied I beat you because I was more qualified than you, you'll be satisfied. But if you feel like the game has been rigged and tilted in my favor, you'll protest.
But don't you see, we've had 50 years. We've had 50 years,
Yes.
and this is where we are at now. In that, now
The solution is not to create positions for people.
that is
is-
the one way that has been.
So if you
created.
talk about 5 tribes, in about 10 years, maybe tribe number 5 or 6 will have ballooned. So do we have to create another position for tribe number 6, which most likely will have overcome tribe number 5? Are we going to continue to create positions until tribe number 42, so that now we have a top leadership of 42 gentlemen and ladies?
That has so many people.
It cannot work like that. Yeah, that is a very slippery slope. It's an escape route for a confused people. So when I look at guys running around talking about how we need to expand the top executive so as to avoid fighting That is not the problem. Kenyans actually don't fight. Kenyans get pushed and lied to a point where they fight. Kenyans love one another most of the time, until, of course, voting happens.
Okay.
Yes.
And then as we conclude, there have been murders last week, especially the one in Kiambu that has set the country into a frenzy. You know, so this was allegedly one member of the family that hacked 5 people in his family.
Yes.
His mother, father, cousin, brother, a foreman as well.
Yeah.
And so I just want us to look at it from the angle of how it was portrayed on the social media,
Yeah.
or the media in general at first. Because there was so much information that was out there
Yeah.
at a go. So a little maybe distortion from this place and this place.
You know, control of the flow of information at this point in our lives is not possible. Because before a journalist from a big media house gets to a scene of crime or something, someone has taken out the, smartphone and captured,
That's
the
what we call
goings on.
citizen journalism, yes.
Yes.
Everyone can be a journalist.
Yes, and shared. And this sharing, comes with what we call lack of filters and censorship and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we call it open journalism, like everybody can participate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the danger with this is sometimes we share what we shouldn't, and we add comments. Most likely there's a game you played when you were in school. I tell you something, you tell someone all the way to number 40. So by the time it gets to number 40, yes. By the time you get to number 40, it's a totally different. If I tell you now, take off your shoes, and then, no, I tell you to tell the next guy to take off his shoes, right? Or her shoes. You'll have to report, he has told me to tell you to take off your shoes.
Yes.
Then, like that. By the time you get to the next person, it's
Number
totally
40.
different. So distortions occurs, information flows from one person to the next, from one, point to the next. So in the process, and most of us are not specialists, we are not experts, but when you look at the whole thing, after you've collected all these pieces of information, you get to see a young man who had a serious problem, most likely from the time maybe he was a small boy. That is mental health. That is purely what it is. So all these comments and jokes in all these forms of media are unwarranted. But that is not. That is because as a society we've not been brought to speed regarding the impact of mental health on on the family and in society. So he, of course, he came out and said that he killed after being inspired by
a series called Killing Eve.
Yes, he wanted to be like the main character in the series. So when it gets to a point where you have to do something in real life that is so scary, just because you've seen it in a series, then there's a problem. So that is a kid who was on the cliff. He just wanted something small to trigger him to do that. And then, what he did was very bad, and then did it to people who are tied to him by blood. For those of us who are blessed with sobriety, when you say hi to your kid or to your wife or to your mom, your dad, there is a flow of love and connection. You feel like you can take the world for these people. So when it converts from that kind of intense love to a point where you're reckless enough to actually hack them to death, it means there's a problem. That is serious mental health. I expect the boy to be examined by a qualified, psychologist and all those guys, so that they determine his mental status. And I think the same parents who suffered, it's unfortunate, may their souls rest in peace, and the ones most likely who could have helped him sometimes back. There's a point where this guy may have been, helped, but then most likely they overlooked all these signs and symptoms most of the fellows who suffer from mental health issues suffer. They overlooked that, or maybe they did not see that, and now look at where it's gotten us. Because of we call it 21st century parenting, where you want to parent from a distance through social media. You want to send a text to your kid, or I want you to read. Sometimes you have to look at your son or your daughter, reading so as to pick some cues here and there. Are they okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, it will be important to see how the case will unveil, the proceedings, and towards the sentencing.
But whichever direction it takes, it's very sad.
Yeah.
And it's not the only thing. Of course, you saw what happened in Syokimau.
Yeah.
There's what we call the craze or the excitement with the foreign man. The man is Nigerian, of course. And I thank Matiang'i because at some point he rounded up all these Nigerians. I don't hate Nigerians, by the way, but the excitement, the appetite for crime is so high. Now,